Welcome all to NPAC's first learning webinar focusing on processing for closing out the year using FIMS. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording this session and you will be able to find the link to this in our knowledge base. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter it in the Q&A below. I'm Amy Strom, the Director of Client Success here at NPAC, and today you will be hearing from Deborah Clark with Foundation Information Systems. Deb has been working with FIMS since 1999. She has a CPA and experience with software and hardware. And since retiring from Blackbaud in 2017, she has been working with Foundation Information Systems to continue providing support to those still using FIMS. Deb has a number of topics to cover in today's session. So I think, Deb, we can get started. Feel free to take it away. There we go.
Okay. Oh, welcome everyone. I see some familiar faces out there. To start off, there are several things that you do at the end of the year that prepare your database for the actual year-end process. And there are also reports that you can run that sort of guarantee that you're ready for your audit. So we're going to go over several of those items. Since I recognize a large number of names out there, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with many of the processes. So before you run end of year closing, which is sort of the main topic of this particular webinar, you might want to get your general ledger ready for the year end. And that may include retiring funds. It may include cleaning out the general ledger of unused accounts. You might have created a few accounts for various funds that you really found out later on that you didn't need. And you want to make sure that basically everything is ticked and tied. So the retiring process, which you do from the file maintenance menu in the fund area, is a very simple process. And you enter your fund and you put in your retirement date. And when you do this, it's going to check to see that the balances of the balance sheet accounts as well as the fund balances are zero. And if all of the fund balances are zero, then it will in fact turn the accounts inactive in the general ledger for the current year. And then when you run the end of year process, it won't create that fund again in the next year. And so one of the typical support calls that we would be getting in FIMS would be, why isn't my account clearing out? And you'll find out that that is because on the balance tab, although you didn't necessarily have a zero balance, these ending balances on the individual lines have to be zero. I don't have any funds ready to clear out, so I can't show you that. But you could either call FIMS support or NPAC support and find out how to close that. Or there's many articles out in the knowledge base that you can read to find out how to clear that out. But once you have all of your ending balances on your fund balances zero, when you run your file maintenance procedure, it will in fact retire and set everything to be inactive. If you make a mistake and you decide that you shouldn't have retired it, then just like this, you can reactivate the fund by clicking the reactivate fund button. So after you've cleared out everything, you can then run end of year closing. So the end of year closing is found in the general ledger, in the file maintenance procedure. And there are a few areas on the screen that you need to pay attention to. For the most part, you're not going to pay any attention to the close short year and the close date. But you do need to pay particular attention to the year being closed. Sure, it is the current year that you're closing. So if you were closing this year, it most likely is that you'll be closing 21 into 22. You are typically going to close or run this procedure 3 times, but you may in fact come in and run it, 20, 30, 40 times. Typically, you're going to run it now so that you can set up the next year for your budgets. If you're going to put budgets into FIMS, you're going to run it for sure at the end of December so that you will have a general ledger available for the following year. You're probably going to run it again sometime in the first few weeks of January, just to sort of pull in any of those year-end gift entries that you might have made or any year-end expense entries that you might have assessed, just to make sure that they're in your beginning balances. And then you might run it periodically. You most certainly are going to run it again finally after your audit is complete and all of your audit adjustments are in. One thing that's nice about FIMS is that FIMS doesn't close out a year. It's always there available to go back and make adjusting entries in. So even if you're a couple of years behind in your audit, you still run end of year closing, you still open up the next year, and you still make transactions in the year that you're in. You can always go back and fix things. At any rate, the thing to remember is that you only want to advance the fiscal year once. So you can tell that you have, in fact, already advanced the fiscal year if when you come into the particular procedure, the year being presented was saying 2022 instead of 2020 or 2021. So if it's saying the current year, then you know you've already advanced it. So that's a clue to keep in mind. If it's like it's doing right now, it's showing an old year, then that implies that you didn't run it last year and click the advanced fiscal year. And what that tends to do is it means that when you go into any screen, it's going to present last year as the year. So here over in the general ledger, you can see it's showing 2020, which from my perspective is a fairly annoying process, because if you're a finance person, every time you go into a screen or every time you run a report, you're not going to see the current year. You're going to see the prior year, and you're constantly having to change it to be the current year. So at that point in time, which typically occurs sometime either in late January or early February, you're going to want to go into the file maintenance procedure and run your end of year closing again and make sure that you do check off that advanced fiscal year box. So if I click on advanced fiscal year, it's going to make some changes. So I want to show you what's going to happen. In the tools process, I'm having some of WebEx is hanging over my FIMS menus. In the system utilities, in system initial setup, on the posting tab, this is where it's holding that year information. So that's one location. And the other location is in the calendar. It's also holding this information in the years. I don't worry too much about the calendar because it tends to take care of itself. So if you run into your closing right now, and you check off the advanced fiscal year box, it will move those dates. You can, in fact, run it just for a single fund. So later on, if you find that a particular fund is out of balance, then you can save some time by coming in and running the end of your closing process without clicking the advance button just for that one particular fund. So I'm going to advance it right now so you can see how those dates change. Doesn't take very long on my system, and everything looks good. There's no differences in debits and credits. Always a nice thing to see. And if you go back here and get your system initial setup posting tab, you'll see that now it's showing what is the current year. So that's the clue that you have that everything ran fine and you advanced it, which means that now if you were to come back to the fund module and open the fund module for the first time and go to the balance tab, it's going to be showing 2021. So you're going to have a fight between the finance department and the non-finance department as to when to make that change, because they, of course, want it to happen right away. And you want it to hang around as the old year for a little while so that all of your activity shows up easily with the 2020 stuff that you're working with. The other impact that change of fiscal year is going to have is in your edit reports. When you're running your posting report in the general ledger, you're going to have warnings that either you're posting to a prior year or warnings that you're posting to a future year. So if you're posting journal entries outside of the year that is associated with the year that shows up on the screen, you're going to get those warnings. So once again, you can post journal entries to last year or this year. And you can even post journals right now to a future year. Don't know why you would, but you can. After you have finished your audit and have closed things down, you probably don't want to process journal entries to a prior year unless you think about them. So if you do a gift adjustment, you probably want to think carefully about the ramifications of that particular adjustment to the balances in both the old fund and the new fund, if it happens to be a fund issue. But if it happens to be a donor change, it really doesn't have an impact to the general ledger, even though journal entries are created. So you want to close down the general ledger so that it doesn't process these journals without you at least considering that. And you do that by going to the File Maintenance General Ledger Close Modules by Date feature. And here you can put the dates in. And I've left them at 2006 for reasons you'll see in a minute. But if you were to change it so that you've closed out 2020 and you don't want anybody to process anything past 2020, then you would have the GL closed as of 12/31/2020. Now, if you process a journal entry and you get an error message that says that you can't process it because it's processing to a closed period, and you say, but really, I do want to process this. It's not going to have any GL impact. It's just going to be, as I said, possibly moving a donor gift from one donor to another, maybe the spouse one and spouse two. So you can come back in here to the close modules by date process and just change the date to a date that's prior to the entry that you're doing. We'll leave it at that for a minute. So I wanted to show you that if you ran, for instance, a gift history, a gift posting report was gifts. Gifts. Yeah. If you process a gift report, process an edit report, and you do it for 2006, you'll see this error, posting to a closed period. So the same thing happens on the grant side. But this way you can catch things before they even get posted in the outer modules. Okay. Now, I mentioned that you can run end of year closing over and over and over again. You can set it up so that it runs automatically. And you go in here to Tools, System Utilities, System Options, and you go down to the General Ledger section. And you may not notice it, but it's the highlighted item that's on the top, and you turn it to yes. Now, what this means is that every time you run the General Ledger edit report, then after the edit report runs, it's going to kick off the end of year processing for all of the funds that are included in the report. So larger foundations that are running a significantly large number of transactions, your facts, your allocations and entries, your asset rebalancing, where the actual processing of the journal entry report takes a while, they may want to turn off the automatic end of year processing until they have processed all those sort of month-end entries, until they have finished them, and then run end of year closing, and then come back and turn the end of year processing back on. But when you're running a regular routine gift report, gift posting or grant posting, AP posting, you leave it on, and then it'll sort of update the balances. So what it's doing when it runs end of year closing and creates the accounts, the first time it's going to create the accounts in the general ledger. So if we go to the general ledger, you'll see that on the account tab for 2022, there isn't anything. So it's going to populate this tab for 2022 with all the GL accounts. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring in every account, and it's going to populate the beginning balance. So you can see that beginning balance field over on the right underneath the actual column. It will do that for all the balance sheet accounts. So all of your assets, your liabilities, and your fund balances. Your fund balances, of course, will calculate by adding together the fund balance beginning and all of the transactions for the years for the associated revenue transfer and expense accounts. So all the R1, T1, and X1 accounts will roll to the F1, the Q1. And that will move into the beginning balance field. The fund balance doesn't have entries that process in a monthly basis. There's only a beginning balance. So if you look at the Q2 balance here, you'll see that there's only a beginning balance. So at the end of the year, it's going to calculate a new ending balance and put that into the beginning balance of the following year. Okay. The only other thing that you have to do to change topics is run the asset rebalancing process. In particular, and this is the one that is frequently forgotten, is the copy prior year target. So it's not a critical one to do in that you'll find out soon enough if you've forgotten to do it. When you run your asset rebalancing entries, which I'm not going to do, but when you run this and you get a report that basically is empty, that should clue you in that, oops, I forgot to move my balances forward. So you need to copy your prior year targets. And all you have to do is come in here, click run your process, choose your from year and your through year, and click the copy target button. You're free to choose a specific strategy or a group of funds or classes or anything, or you can run it for the whole thing. And all it's doing is taking the current targets and moving them into the next year. There are a few other items in the accounts payable module that you may want to deal with. One is the where's the P? The clear 1099 process. So there are many tricks to running 1099s out of FIMS, and one of the items that you frequently will do is add a value on the vendor record, which is a 1099 adjustment value. Sometimes it might be a full amount because you never processed a voucher for that particular 1099 and you need to have one printed out, or the value that's coming out on your 1099 report isn't correct and you've discovered where the problem is, but it's just easier to make an adjustment on the actual vendor record, like minus $200, so that it makes the final number be correct than it is to go fixing the actual voucher. or vouchers that were associated with that particular vendor. So you might have 1099 adjustment amounts hanging around. So if you come in here, let me see. If you come in here to the clear 1099 adjustment amount out and you choose the default of grantee and the 1099 adjustment, click OK, it's going to tell you all of the different amounts that are going to get clear. And here's our 200 we just put in. And you can click the clear value button up here, and it's going to clear out the balances. So here you can see it's back at 0. So that just sort of sets things ready for the next year. Obviously, this is one process that you want to do after you have run your 1099s for the year. So this is something that you're probably not going to do until the end of January. On the other hand, if you know you haven't put any 1099 adjustments in yet this year, and you are ready to run your 1099s, but you do find errors and you find discrepancies all over the place, you can always clear your 1099 and then put in the new values that you need for the current year before running your current balances. So that's the clear 1099 button. The other item in file maintenance is the update future accounts. So what FIMS allows you to do, and very few foundations actually use this feature, it's primarily used because you have a need in your fund statements to show the current liability and a future liability for grants. So if you primarily only do single payment or current year granting, then you can sort of turn off your ears right now. But if you do multi-year granting and you need to sort of split out that current and future balance, then you might have set up some accounts in the fund module. So it's in funds, fund code maintenance, fund class. And it's the grant payable and the grant expense in future years. So that if you were to look at the balance sheet of a fund that has these particular accounts, you might see a balance in both the current year, it's just going to be the current year's payment. So let's say you had a scholarship that was payable over 4 years, and it was a $1,000 scholarship for each year, 4,000 in total. Then what you would like to see before you pay that scholarship is 1,000 payable current year and 3,000 payable future year. And that way your grantees know that, well, the money isn't coming out of the account this year, it will be coming out in future years. So it's something for them to plan. Well, obviously at the end of the year, miraculously, you're down to 0 in the current year and 3,000 in the future. But starting the next year, 1,000 of that is really a current year payable and 2,000 is a future year. So you need to do something to move that 1,000 into the current year. So that's the process. So when you run this file maintenance process and you update future years accounts, then when you click on the update payable account, which is the traditional rule, I don't know when people have actually used the update expense accounts. But when you update the payable account, what you're going to put in here for date is going to be not 22, which is what you would think. It's actually 23, because that's when the future year starts. And remember, this is setting up for next year. So if you were to run this, what it's going to do is it's going to make a debit and a credit in the GL and move it from one bucket to another in the GL. And it's also going to make changes on the history tab in the accounts payable on the voucher. So if you were looking at the line item down here, it's actually going to change the payable. That voucher look at, but it's going to change the voucher to be 2110. So it'll change the voucher value down here. So the best thing to do, or my suggestion would be, if you haven't set this up before, would be to go over to your test and learn or your demo database and set up your accounts for a fund and manually play around with it to see how the GL changes and how the AP changes and how playing with the particular years change, and see if that actually will improve your fund statement processing. Does that give you a little more information for the donors that might be helpful? The next part is my favorite part, which is the reconciliation report. So there are several reconciliation reports that you certainly run at the end of the year, and there are a few that you're going to run during the year, and you should be running them on a regular basis. So in the general ledger, there is a GL reconciliation, reconcile subsidiary modules with the GL. And the first time, if you've never run this report before, you're going to come in and you're going to see empty boxes. So there, I call these 4 boxes here. One for your contribution accounts, one for your grants payable, your expense, and your AP. And you're going to have to fill them out. And after you run this report, you may get literally 1 line for every single fund. And that is typically indicating that you don't have your account set up. So don't panic right away. Just examine a few of them and find out. And typically what you've done is you've forgotten your inner funds. So you're going to have your span of contribution accounts for your regular gifts and for your inner fund gifts. And there are, at least in my version, but I think something's changed. So somebody can throw into the comment, either Robin or Rick, whether these include boxes are here for each grouping. But it does allow you, in my version, to just work on one particular section of the report at a time by choosing the include. What it does is it presents, and I know I have problems if I go to 2017. It shows where the balances, oops, sorry. This one has a nice rerun. Didn't include gifts. I left off AP. So it's going to show where there's variance. And there is an entire 2 or 3 support articles out there that talk about how to fix these problems and how to look for these problems in the various reports to find out what caused them. But typically they're caused by adjustments where you have done the adjustment in the general ledger and not done the adjustment in the actual outer module. So in the case of a gift adjustment, if you just process a movement of a gift from one fund to another, or from a gift to a non-gift account, or you book a journal entry into a gift account and don't enter it through the gift module, all of those things are going to cause variances. So in this case, there's gift detail here, but there's no detail associated in the GL module. So somebody processed a gift into the gift account here, but they used the GL account that wasn't associated with the gift account. This case, it might be a simple process of fixing those account numbers on the front screen. If you see, for instance, a positive and a negative value between 2 accounts that are identical, I don't see any here, but if you saw, for instance, 2,500 here and a negative 2,500 up here, that probably indicates that you did a grant adjustment between 2 funds and you didn't book it right. So a positive and a negative usually means that there's an associated adjustment that didn't go through. So you can test through them. The idea of the whole thing is that you're supposed to end up with a report that has nothing on it, because that would show that the reports that you run in the outer module and the reports that you run in the general ledger are going to tie. So there's a good supporting documentation if you run any of these other reports we're going to talk about that are outer module reports with supporting your audit, your financials. Okay. This report probably should be run on a monthly basis. And the reason you run it on a monthly basis, because those variances that you see are most likely going to tweak your memory. You're going to look at it and say, oh, that $369.14, I remember that adjustment. And you'll know immediately how to fix them. If nothing else, it means that there's less volume to work through. So that is one report that you should be running on a monthly basis. Now in the accounts payable module, you have a payables as of a past due date, which is one that you can run at the end of the year. That's typically a report that is run to support an audit request, because the bottom line number on the report should in fact support the general ledger outstanding items, the AP. You can run it on just your admin vouchers to support your accounts payable balance, or you can run it on all grants, which includes both scholarships and regular grants, because typically it's one grants payable balance. Or you can just run it on the two separate things, the scholarship grants and non-scholarship grants. So either way, you end up with a report that will substantiate your payable balance. So in this case, since I ran it on all, that should be both my outstanding AP as well as my grants payable balance. Sorry, I just looked down at the bottom and saw that I was screen sharing on my laptop as well. The facts to GL comparison report, which is the next report, is run out of the facts module. And this is a report that should also be run on a monthly basis. And you can run it for a pool, or you can run it for all pools. And right now, this is set up for all pools. And you can run it on any time period. I'm going to go back and run it for 2013 because I don't have much in 2020. You can run it for differences only. For the most part, when we train running this report, we tell you to come in and don't touch anything with the date and run it. Don't touch any of the checkboxes down at the bottom. And in my zero pool, there's no funds out of balance. There's a problem in my Madison pool. And it's giving you a little caution item here that says, oops, I can make manual transactions. So maybe that might be what the cause is. The same for the others. Typically what you're going to find when you run this report is that once again, you've got a positive and a negative that are being entered where somebody went in and made an adjustment. Once again, there's the support article out there that talks about what causes these particular problems and how to fix them. But typically they're caused by somebody actually going in and modifying a transaction on the transaction screen here by editing a dollar amount or a fund. So if somebody edits the dollar amount or deletes the transaction, and you can do that if you've turned off that prevent manual transaction block on the pool record. Or if somebody has made journal entries using the FA key over in the general ledger, then you can cause transactions to be posted in the GL that don't come over in the facts module. So all of those nuances are discussed in that support article, and they're not appropriate for this particular venue right now. But if you have troubles with that one, we can certainly help you clean it up But once again, this report you should run on a monthly basis, and you should get a clean bill of health every time you run it. And that way, at the end of the year, when you run it, you don't have any surprises. Back, this next report you can run out of the AP module, the Outstanding Grants by Fund report, or you can run it out of the grants module. It is the same report being run in either place. I love this report. This report is done also at the end of the year to support your outstanding grants balance. And if you run it with display zero end balances, then it will show the activity for, I gotta get it back to a year that probably has activity. It's going to show all of the activity, including grants that were fully paid. Sorry. Did I check off the box before running it? I did. Okay. So it's going to support the situation where you fully paid your grants. What you're going to have is in your commitments outstanding column, you're going to have your beginning balance of your payables for the year. In the new approved grants column, you should have your expense for the year. The payments for the grants will be how much you've paid, and then the commitments outstanding is going to be your payable balance. If you run it the default, which is without the zero end balances, it's going to be a shorter report, but it will in fact substantiate what the ending balance is that you tie out to your grants payable balance. So we gave you two ways of running it. One, which sometimes the auditor is going to say, well, I'd like to have a full beginning, all activity and ending balance report. And that's one way of getting it. You should explore the other options for how to run this report. You can run it for all grants, you can exclude the interfunds, or you can include the interfunds. I haven't had anyone in probably, certainly since I retired, but I'd say the 10 years before I retired, do anything with any of these options other than the include grant number option. Most people just run as exists right now. This was a new option that we added probably around 6 or 7 years ago, the display ending, the zero ending balances for people who wanted that full from and through. And I haven't really seen anybody playing around with these particularly four options either, but feel free to run it on a small selection so that it runs quickly and test them all out to see what you get. It's a cool report. The last report we're going to talk about is the pledge report. And if you don't have the pledge module, then obviously you don't have to worry about it at all. And it's very similar to the AP as of report as well. It's going to give you an age trial balance for your year, and it's showing an aging. And the trick to this report is, for the most part, to have all the dates the same. It's the most common support problem, is the setting up of the dates. And there's one date in particular that's really important, which is the pledge date. The pledge date, this should be the earliest pledge that you have that's still open. So the easiest thing to do is 1999, 1900, just something that's really way back. But then the as of date, the aging date, and the through date would all be the end of your current year. So forget about the fact that I have 12/13 in there. But it would all be like 12/31/2020, 21 rather, 21/21. I just don't have anything close enough so that it's kind of boring to look at if you look at 2021. But what you should see is you should see something in various columns. So when you run your report, if everything shows up in the future column, you didn't set your dates right. But this is kind of what you should be seeing. So it gives you an ability to see an aging. If you really don't care about the aging and all you really care about is your total pledge number, then the dates aren't as important, other than that from and through date period. Okay. Another thing you might need to do is change your grant numbers. So some of you run your grant numbers with a year associated with them. So grants that started in 2021 start with 21, which means that at the beginning of next year, you want your grants to start with either 2022 or 22 or whatever your sequencing is. So to do that, you would go to Tools, System Utilities, Set Automatic Numbers. And this is typically the only number that you're going to come in on a regular basis and change. And you would come in here and change it to be the first grant number. It can either be 0 or 1, it doesn't matter. And when you create your grant number, your first grant number for next year, then it will be assigned this number. If you forget to do it, or if you do it and you still have to process a grant from last year and you want the old number, do not despair. If you catch it before you post, that's the best time to happen. If you go to the Application History tab, which is counterintuitive because you haven't posted the grant yet, but if you go to the Application History tab and go to the Adjustment tab and choose the adjustment process, sorry, wrong one, grant number, pass through the help, you'll see that there's both a posted and an unposted grant application option. So you would choose unposted grant application, and you would choose your grant number for your unposted grant and fix it to be whatever number it should be, which is a 21 because you've already changed to 22s. And then down here, put your new grant number in. So don't despair if you changed your grant numbers to 22s and then you find that you still have a 21 to do. Or alternatively, if you forgot to change your grant numbers and you were about to process and you go, oops, they're all saying 21 something or other, and you need to change them to a 22. Now, you can set up a tickle that will remind you that you need to change your grant numbers. And you can set up your tickles in your contacts. So I have a tickle there that says advanced grant numbers. But my contact date on my tickles is 2021. So this particular tickle will, of course, because my tickle date says 2022, it's not going to pop up until 2022. So after my tickles have finished for the year, I've passed through 2012, 28, 2022, I'm not going to be reminded of this tickle anymore. So I want to increase my dates. So therefore, I want to use the file maintenance procedure to advance my contact dates. and that will give you the option to change the action date and the tickle dates. The problem with this particular tool is that it doesn't give you a report that tells you what it is you're going to be changing. So I like to set up a recurring tickle data grid, and someone can help you set up a data grid, but it's a very simple data grid. And in this case, it shows exactly one item. Here's my tickles again. And all it is a selection of recurring equals yes. So recurring is down here, and you just set it to be yes. And it's going to show all your recurring tickles. So when you actually run the process and it tells you that it advances the date, then you'll know which one it changed. Okay. So that is everything I had to say.
Great, thanks, Deb. Is there any questions out there that we could ask Debbie, that anybody'd like to ask? I know we have one, Deb, that was, does the end of year close in FIMS affect the spending balance displayed in Donor Central?
That's a Rick question.
Okay, well, we will get Rick to answer that one.
Or a Robin, I was never a Donor Central person.
Okay. We will get that. Is there any other questions? Right, I will take the screen back, Deb. All right, we'll move beyond this. My contact information is on there. If you have any additional questions you want to follow up with me later. Additionally, if you like to stay in touch, be sure that you're on our contact list for up-to-date information. Please send an email to hello@npact.com, and please follow us on social media. If you have any other questions, you can also send them to the hello@npact.com. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Watch for new announcements on more learning opportunities on FIMS in the new year. Have a happy new year, all.